Charles Leclerc has finally done it. He's won through the streets of Monaco at home.
The grandstands he saw built as a kid growing up now rise for him, and for the first time in 93 years this fabled race is won by one of their own. Charles Leclerc wins the Monaco Grand Prix to achieve his dream. Victory in his home race. Well done, Charles Leclerc. It's mission accomplished, destiny fulfilled. You've got that one forever.
Yes! 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 Tonight is going to be a big night.
Welcome to Monte Carlo, where the home hero produced a masterclass to claim a very emotional victory on the streets where he grew up. I'm Tom Clarkson, and joining me here in the Monaco paddock is Diego Mejia from Fox Mexico. How are you?
I'm good, Tom. Thanks for inviting me again. Didn't I say that it was going to be Leclerc's win last week?
See, this is why we had to get you back on the show.
I was lucky.
But wasn't it an amazing... I mean, the atmosphere post-race has just been stunning. It's a real feel-good victory, this one, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a very popular victory, let's say. Just as it was Lando's in Miami, this was a long time coming for him at his sixth attempt, but finally the pieces came together. He was the king of Monaco this week. I mean, from free practice one, he was on it. I remember asking him about the gap that he had to other drivers. So during practice at some point you watched, and he was a second faster than anyone, 6/10 faster than Carlos. And he said, well, maybe I'm taking more risks right now than the other guys. But in some way, he was getting to that limit easier than the others. And he was getting more familiar with it than the others. Pole by 2/10 is not massive, but is something in Monaco. And I guess at every point during the week there was little doubt that he was the fastest man around this track, and the way the race unfolded only helped that cause. I think the crash, luckily everything good for Checo, because that was a massive shunt, but that took out of the equation the strategy, which was probably one of the worries on his head. Getting undercut or overcut, it was a risk, and that was completely out of picture once they were allowed to change tires while the red flag was on.
All he had to do was get away from the line at that second start, and then it was kind of just counting out the laps. But let's hear from the man of the moment. Here's what victory meant to Charles Leclerc.
Monaco is the Grand Prix that made me dream of becoming a Formula One driver. I remember being so young and watching the race with my friends, obviously with my father, that has done absolutely everything for me to get to where I am today. And I feel like I don't only accomplish a dream of mine today, but also one of his. And it's just such a special weekend overall. It's a street track, it's such a difficult track to put everything together, from FP1 to qualifying to then all the laps you have to do in the race. And to finally make it in front of my whole family, my friends that were watching all over the track, is a very, very, very special feeling.
How emotional were you up there on the podium?
I think where I struggled most to actually contain my emotions was during the last 10 laps of the race, more than on the podium. I realized actually 2 laps to the end that I was struggling to see out of the tunnel just because I had tears in my eyes, and I was like, Charles, you cannot do that now. You still have 2 laps to finish, and especially on a track like Monaco, it's you have to be on it all the way to the end. So it was very difficult to contain those emotions, those thoughts again of the people that have helped me to get to where I am today. It's only a win. The season is still very, very long. It's 25 points like any other wins. However, emotionally, this one means so much. And I think the fact as well that we started twice on pole position in the past, and that we couldn't manage to get the win for one reason or another, that we couldn't really control, not in our control, makes this one even more so special.
And it's just 31 points between you and Max in the championship now.
Oh, is it 31? Oh, somebody told me 23. So I was excited, but 31 is okay. I mean, I'll take it anyway, but it's a bit more than what I had been told. So, it's okay. But I don't think about the championship for now anyway, and it's still too early on in the season. I think the upgrades that we have brought in Imola, we have still to see how well they work and where it will bring us. And then it's all about maximizing all weekends, and then hopefully little by little we'll get there.
I just felt there was something different about him this weekend. Even on Thursday in the press conference, there was a little bit of chaos actually, where all the other drivers were taking the mickey out of him for liking, I think it was Harry Potter, and how he, as a kid, looked like Harry Potter or something. But the way he dealt with that was just so calm, and he let them all laugh at him. But you could see, I don't know, I feel there's been something about him, and everywhere he's gone, he's had, the media hounding him, the local media in particular. I can't imagine how many signatures he's signed of selfies he's taken this weekend, yet everything he's taken in his stride.
I mean, he's been here before with all the pressure that this race probably brings, different to the other races. The fact that he has been on pole probably made Saturday like, okay, we've done this before, now let's move forward. Because I remember especially asking him on the TV pen after qualifying, and his mind was not on qualifying anymore. His mind was absolutely set on the race. He was speaking more about getting the things that they needed to get right for the race, the things that hadn't panned out in the past when he had other chances to perform here and win his home race. So I think he's getting a lot of momentum right now. I think as we arrived here, most of the rivals saw Ferrari as the favorites. Carlos has always been good. I mean, he has 100% rate of Q3 here and points finishes, which tells you he's quite good here. So he sets the benchmark for a guy who's also very quick at Monaco, and that's only going to help you, inside the team. I like Charles a lot. I haven't had the chance to get to the person, more the racer from the outside, but you can tell he's a very nice person, and all the things that have happened to him in his life, the way he was quick to remind his father, Hervé, Jules Bianchi, all his family. He's such a great guy, and I guess that makes a lot of people, be happy for him to finally get this out of the way, because it's only his 6th win in Formula One.
Isn't that mad?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the last 12 poles he hasn't converted to a victory either. But they say when you get your first win, the sluice gates open and it just takes you to another level. And we were talking about that with Lando Norris after his win in Miami. I just wonder whether Charles' time is now. Whether this win could be the catalyst for more. He's, as you were saying a minute ago, he's happy with the Ferrari. I feel Ferrari as a team are in a really strong place now. A bit like McLaren, everything they're putting on that car seems to be working. And I wonder whether he can now mount a championship challenge, which raises my next point, which is, Monaco is unique. It is the ultimate street track. It is bumpy. You're going over the curbs a lot. If you're quick here, does that mean you're going to be quick in Canada, for example, where we're also using the curbs? Does it mean you're going to be quick anywhere else, or is this not a bearing on anywhere else?
I think to some extent it can be, but yeah, it's very unique track, so it's hard to take conclusions out of this race that may apply to the whole season. But I think there are certain things, like, for example, briefly touching on McLaren. When we got here, they said, slow corners, that's our Achilles heel, so don't expect us to be just as good as we were in the past 2 races, but they were. And Oscar was, he wasn't as close to pole this time, but he was Charles' closest challenger during the race and during qualifying. So you can see that, for example, the McLaren is now a more complete package than it was before. And I think that, just as Max was saying, this race was a struggle. RB20 doesn't like the curbs, and you need to be good on the curbs in Canada, for example, among other places. So there are certain things you can take out of this, not to expect that Red Bull is suddenly going to have another Monaco in Montreal, but they won't have the advantage that they enjoyed at the beginning of the year, because that's my main takeaway of the whole weekend, and probably these past 2 weekends, is that the championship is not anymore like it was 4 races ago, when I guess many of us were, this is, a foregone conclusion. It's going to be Max, it's going to be Red Bull, There's no way it's going to be different. I don't think it's the case anymore.
Diego, look at this record that Leclerc has here in Monaco. 2017, he lost an F2 feature race due to a loose wheel. 2018, he moves into Formula One with Sauber, does not finish. 2019, his first year with Ferrari, does not finish. 2021, qualifies on pole but unable to take the start due to a drive shaft failure. 2022, he's leading the race but loses out to rivals on strategy and finishes 4th. 2023, he starts and finishes the race P6. So I just can't imagine the pressure he was feeling with all of that storied history behind him. But 2024, he's done it. Talk about timing. Here is Marc Gene, Ferrari test driver, who's been at Ferrari since 2004. He's witnessed many Monaco victories. Marc, just wow. What a feel-good victory that one was. And it was really never in doubt from the moment we turned up in Monaco last week.
Already Friday he was extremely fast, really, really fast. The car was very good as well, especially in the slow-speed corners, And I would even say today was meant to happen, even what happened with Carlos, that he was reinstated P3. The fact that there was no more pit stop, that made the race even easier for Charles. But honestly, it was so important because it looked like there was a curse into Monaco for him, and I can tell you there's so much weight out of his shoulders now. I could not have imagined going to Monaco next year and today something happening, it would have been unbearable. So I'm so glad for him. And then look at I know we shouldn't look, and Fred says don't look at the championship, but it's unavoidable. You look at the championship, and 20-something points is nothing, But anyway, we enjoy now that, and then we'll see what happens after.
Hi, Mark. So how was it? Only the second race for Brian Botzi on Charles here, also a new performance engineer, and second race, they're winners.
Yeah, we have a structure in place at Ferrari from the factory that we give a lot of support. We've given a lot of support. We've taken 2 people helping Brian, but Brian has been doing very well straight away. So yeah, it's good. It's very good. I thought not so much Brian, because Brian, I know him, but the performance engineer said, hey, look, normally you go through a desert before you win like that. It's not like that you win on the second race. But yeah, the team did a very good job supporting him, and honestly, they didn't seem to be newcomers into the engineering side.
Were there any nervous moments this weekend? Practice he was stunning. Qualifying, he said Q1 and Q2, he was a bit nervous, and also in the race, were there any nervous moments?
Fun enough, the most difficult moment was Q1. He had 1 lap, he could have been out of Q1, it's incredible, Then the race, both starts, he was in control, he was doing pace management. He said that never, there was a moment that Piastri even thought about overtaking into the tunnel, which would have been mad to do that there, where the Alpine had the crash. No, he was in control. All weekend, I would say. Only Q1 was the only moment that we were a little bit worried, yes.
As you said, Mark, Charles was the man of the week, and he was much quicker than anyone. At some stages, he was the second, 6/10 faster than second fastest. What is the secret, you think, to his speed here in Monaco?
Yeah, because Carlos is normally very good in Monaco. Very, very good. At some point, he really struggled. I'm very happy that Carlos had such a comeback in qualifying. Charles has been just so confident on the braking. Into Rascas, Saint-Devote, he was super fast. I don't know, it's really surprising how he, first lap already of FP1, he was so much on it, He just says that the car, we've been doing some setup work lately, and he says now the car is doing exactly what he wants it to do. But you could already tell from Imola, the car is a lot to his liking lately, and you can tell he's very happy the way the car is behaving to how he drives.
I'm excited going forward, aren't you?
Absolutely. Let's go, Canada.
Let's go. Enjoy the party. Thank you so much for your time, Mark. Have a great time. Thank you. Always good to hear from Marc, Diego. As I said when I introduced him, he's been at Ferrari for so long. He's seen the dominance of those noughties with Michael Schumacher. He's seen the more lean periods. I am convinced now that under Fred Vasseur's leadership, Ferrari are not only quick, but they're here to stay.
Yeah, I think Fred is steering the ship to some extent. I think things are coming together. I think you can feel the changes are bringing results. having your debut as a race engineer or a performance engineer at Imola in Italy with Leclerc, and then coming to Monaco, Charles' home race. I mean, there could hardly be. I mean, you could maybe put Monza somewhere to make it even more pressurized, but it was going to be a test, and they delivered. And you could hear Brian really telling Charles, "Stop! You don't need to be as quick as you've been the whole weekend to win this race. Let's just pace this. Let's not ruin the tires. Let's be clever. Don't mess it."
And I think this has cemented their relationship. I mean, I think we both know that a lot of racing drivers are very superstitious. They always get into the car from the same side. You know, David Coulthard used to wear the same underpants for 20 years, I think, on race day.
Yeah.
Things like that. So I think if you hit the ground running with a new race engineer, I feel that Charles and him, he's not going to want to change anything now from an engineering point on his car, because Brian Bozzi has got that car exactly how Charles wants it.
Carlos Sainz will climb on the rostrum here for the third time in his Formula One career.
Yeah, congrats, guys. Great weekend for the team. And for Charles, very happy for you guys and for him. Congrats.
Carlos, let's come to you now. Your third Monaco podium in the last 4 years. What does this one mean to you?
It means more for the fact that being a Ferrari driver, being P3, but especially seeing your teammate that is Monegasque standing on top of the podium in front of his home crowd, in front of all the tifosi and all the mechanics, I think is one of the best images I've seen in Formula One, and extremely happy for him, for the team. He deserves it because he's driven at an incredible level this weekend, and he's put together a really solid weekend. And it was coming for him, I felt, because he was driving really well recently. And it's a really good day for Ferrari and Charles.
Can we get your thoughts on what happened at the original turn one?
Yeah, I got a really good start, and I had kind of an opportunity going into turn one, and I arrived a bit long with a lot of understeer in the car and trying to keep the position with Oscar, as it's pretty much your only chance to pass. We had the slightest of contacts. For some reason, Oscar and I, we seem to have a magnet recently between each other. For some reason that I don't understand, because we get on well and everything is okay, but we seem to always find each other on track, and I didn't even feel the contact. It was so slight, or it was so small that I didn't even see it or feel it, but as soon as I exit turn one, I could feel the puncture. And yeah, it looked like my race was over there at one point. I was really lucky to get the P3 back and race from there the rest of the race.
Ferrari are just 24 points behind Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship. Do you think this is a genuine title fight now? Do you think you have the car underneath you to challenge every weekend?
I think my common sense tells me that in normal tracks, Red Bull should still be favorites. Domination, like we were seeing, hopefully not, but favorites, yes. And then it will be a very tight fight with both McLaren and us. I think we are all three at a very similar level. Our last reference of a normal track is Imola and Miami. And if I see those two tracks, we seem to be half a tenth behind McLaren and maybe a tenth or two behind Red Bull. And it still means that any small progress, any small upgrade, any small thing that we bring to the car might switch it to a potential race victory, or a winning car. So Monaco, we've always been strong. Street circuits like Singapore and Monaco shows the strengths of the Ferrari. And at the same time, being within 24 points of the Red Bull in the Constructors, you see that when you put them under pressure, Max did a mistake in Q3 Run 2, Checo was out in Q1, we all just need to be there.
It was a nice moment for him, I feel, just to be back up in the bright lights, finishing P3 on the podium there. It's good for, it's good for business when you're looking for a job, isn't it? And one thing that really took off this weekend is the thought of him going to Williams. Now, on paper, Williams haven't been great these last few years. What is your take on that story? A, do you think it could happen? And B, are Williams on the right trajectory?
Well, when I first read it, I thought I find it hard to believe, especially when you look at Williams and when you look at Sauber, when you know that Audi is coming in and that team is going to change for the good. Why better Williams than Audi, which is going to be, a a team built basically around him. But then I guess one of the points that the Spanish media was making was back in 2014 when we had the big regulation change for the power units. If you had the right power unit, you were going to be good. And if Mercedes does it again, if you have a Mercedes power unit on the back of your chassis, you may be well off for at least for the start of the regulation cycle. There's no seat at McLaren, so that would be, they say, an opportunity. I still find it hard to believe. One thing is for sure, Carlos is in everyone's list, and that's only going to make him negotiate a very good contract for the coming years.
Well, and I think Checo Perez having this little dip in form might make Red Bull think twice about who their second driver is. That Carlos is probably holding out for that as well. But I find it interesting that it was only in Imola last weekend that James Vowles, team principal of Williams, came out with the line that the car is overweight. Now, the car has been overweight for the previous 6 races as well, but he only chose then to start talking about it publicly, and I thought that was a very public message to Carlos Sainz to say, look, these are our issues, we are rectifying it almost by the race, but I'm sure that was somehow a public message to say to Carlos, come on, we're sorting our problems out. Maybe reading too much into it. I did bump into Eddie Jordan yesterday, who I might add, it was lovely to see EJ. Anyway, I said to him, EJ, you seem to be managing everyone in Formula One now, because of course Adrian Newey publicly thanked him for his input, I suppose is the word, in what Adrian should be doing next with his life. But also, I had just seen EJ talking to Carlos Sainz Sr., so I said, well, what advice did you give him? And he said, I don't think Sauber's the answer, which I think is interesting. I mean, EJ, he knows Formula One, and I think he's probably putting 2 and 2 together and coming to the same conclusion that you've come to about the Mercedes power unit. I think Mercedes are very, very good. All the guys and girls at Brixworth got it right last time, and the messaging we're getting out of Brixworth again is that they're making good progress. So perhaps Williams and Carlos Sainz could be a thing. So what about this championship challenge then? You know, Ferrari are just 24 points behind Red Bull. Charles is just 31 points behind Max Verstappen. I know we shouldn't get too excited. We know how good Red Bull are, particularly on the more traditional circuits, high-speed circuits, but Ferrari are just getting the job done, particularly I think in the Constructors' Championship, because they've got two really good drivers, whereas Checo Perez had another poor weekend here. And I think if you're going to win the Constructors' Championship this year, you need both your drivers scoring. Doesn't matter what car you've got.
Yeah, I think coming back to what we spoke last week at Imola, when the car is not there, Checo suffers the most, and he suffered this week. I mean, 2 consecutive races not being able to advance into Q3. This time he was Q1. He was, I mean, if you looked at his best sector times, he wasn't that far off from Max, but it was such a hectic F1, just as Mark was saying. It was hit and miss, and Alonso missed it, you know. Also, the Aston is not the best at its best right now, but that tells you it was very fine margins this week, and unless you get everything right, it was going to be very difficult come the race, because you don't qualify well here, you're not going to race well, and that's what happened to Checo. And unfortunately, he had a very bad crash, which I was surprised that there was even not an investigation on it, because I understand it's a first lap incident, but
that gap was always going to close.
Exactly. You see, the way up from Saint-Devote to Massenet is not a straight. It kind of is in terms of the guys being on the throttle all the way up, but it kind of veers left and then right slightly, and that. Yeah, it wasn't on. That move from Magnussen wasn't on, and he was not going to drive on the outside of Checo into Massenet either. So I think that deserved a little closer look, in my opinion. It was a big hit
I would
for
agree.
Checo.
And I think Kevin Magnussen might be the most relieved man in Monaco.
Absolutely.
This evening. He's on 10 penalty points, and I feel he's had penalty points for less in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen more points this year for impeding in qualifying than I ever had. And I mean, Kevin had the chance to avoid the crash easily. He was not going to gain a lot, and he chose not to.
Let's talk about McLaren now. Here's what Oscar Piastri had to say after a very impressive drive to P2.
Very, very happy. Third podium in F1 certainly doesn't get old. So, very happy to have it here in Monaco, especially, if there's one podium apart from your home podium that you want to stand on, it's probably here. So, very, very pleased for the whole team. I think especially for our side of the garage, it's been a promising few weekends now, and nice to finally get a good result out of it. So, very, very happy.
And in terms of your battle with Charles, was there any moment in the race when you were tempted to send it?
I had an attempt about 10 or 15 laps into turn 8. We were going pretty slow. I think at one point we were going slower than Formula 2. So when you're going that slow, you've got a fair few options. But I kind of knew that once I showed my hand in where I was going to try and overtake, that he would probably be wise to it from there. So I managed to get very close in turn 7, one lap. Tried to show the nose in turn 8, but he reacted just quick enough. So after that point, I knew I was going to be very limited on options.
And you said a moment ago it's been a good few races for you now, but what does this weekend say about McLaren's competitive position in Formula 1? Do you think now you're a factor? You can win every race going forward if the cards fall for you?
I think so. It's been 3 very different circuits in the past 3 races, and we've been competitive at all of them. Miami was probably one of our worst circuits before this year. Imola's always been kind to us, but we had a very strong weekend there, and let's say our car's never been the strongest in the slow corners, and this weekend we've been very quick again. So I think we can be confident wherever we go. I feel like we don't have to rely on the high-speed circuits like we did last year to get our results, which is a very exciting thing to have going forward. And I think the pecking order is as tight as it's ever been, especially this weekend. Going to qualifying, I think, we thought that there could be any one of 4 teams on pole, which I don't think we've been able to say for a while. So I think we can definitely be in the fight every weekend.
Another good weekend for the Aussie, Oscar Piastri Leclerc, as he likes to call himself here in the Principality.
It's a Monegasque one too, then.
Yeah. He seems to be trying to find some little bit, wherever we're racing in the world, he's looking to see if he's got a little bit of that nationality. But anyway, and I think Charles was talking about adopting him, but he's been really good again, hasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, we were speaking about this at Imola, about his first victory being close. It wasn't that close here, but he was the main man from McLaren, and he's had 2 consecutive weekends being second fastest in qualifying. Lando wasn't very happy on Saturday, of course, because it's now 2 races in a row. It was quite close. The gap was nothing at Imola, but here it was a little different. And Oscar from the go was on it, just as sharp. So he's continuing to build momentum, and the McLaren MCL38 was beautiful on those Senna colors this weekend. The main thing from McLaren is it's a more complete package now. You can tell after being so quick around the streets of Monaco, and they keep getting momentum. I'm sure there'll be some more good upgrades on the way. Barcelona might tell us a lot about what can we expect from them, but it seems like now like a 3-way fight at the front, where Ferrari, Red Bull and McLaren, depending on the track and how suitable is for each car, may be the dominant force. But now the margins are not like they were at the beginning of the year, and like even in pre-season testing.
Now, you say the McLaren is a more complete package now. Do you mean by that the upgrades they've introduced recently have sort of rectified some of their weaknesses, so particularly through the slow corners, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, I remember I asked Oscar on the TV pen on Saturday if he liked, that F1 stats were showing slow corners one to the McLaren drivers. he was not too keen on saying, the stats. I'm not sure if I can believe those stats, those numbers, but he can tell that is definitely an improvement on that. And if that was a weak area for them, and it's not that much anymore, that can only be good for their hopes for the rest of the year. Yeah.
But when you're developing a car, is there any danger that if you you know, you have a weakness in slow speed corners, as McLaren have had in the past. They've improved that, but does that come at the expense of something else? Maybe their speed through the faster corners? Or do you think we've seen enough here to know that no, they've just improved the slow speed without compromising anything else?
Yeah, I think we still have to see them being quick on long corners. I guess that's something Andrea Stella has mentioned before, and that I think we'll have to wait more to Barcelona to really see. Exactly. Yeah, and the last sector too. I guess the right-hander before the quick sweeps to the right after they took the chicane away. So yeah, I guess Barcelona is always very telling. So after Barcelona, I guess we can draw better conclusions about who's where with what and how much of a battle we have among those three teams.
I wonder how frustrated Oscar Piastri was getting stuck behind Charles Leclerc in those early laps, because they were going like 3 seconds a lap slower than they were capable of. And I guess, Diego, I sit there going, I mean, he did actually have a go going into the tunnel, didn't he? He had a lunge, but you sit there going, if you're 3 seconds a lap slower, is there anything you can do as the driver behind? I look at the F2 race this morning when Ollie Behrman overtook Kimi Antonelli, his teammate at Prema, at the hairpin. And he just did a lovely switcheroo, and it made me think, gosh, it is possible to overtake around here. Why can't the F1 boys do a bit more? But I guess the dimensions of the F1 cars are bigger, the speeds, even though we're 3 seconds a lap slower, are a little bit higher as well. So
yeah, I guess that's very true. The cars are much bigger than F2s, and that maneuver that you mentioned, one of them, I guess Kimi was coming out of the pits, so he was on cold tires, so there was a bit more of a chance for Behrman to do something about it. But I guess admirable, he overdid it, and then he got the opportunity, Behrman, to overtake Antonelli.
And I guess this was always going to be a static race after we got the restart, and they were able to change tyres. Yeah. Wasn't it? It was going to be a procession. Actually, this is the first race in F1 history where the top 10 qualifiers finished in the same order in the race. First time that the whole top 10 has done that. Now, we've talked about Mercedes power units. Let's talk about the Works Mercedes team. George Russell coming home in 5th and Lewis Hamilton in 7th. Different strategies for those two guys. Given the circumstances of the restart and things, that was about as good as they were going to get?
Yeah, I guess in the end, maybe it didn't change much the race. One thing before speaking about the race is they were both on different front wing configurations. Since Friday, Lewis was on, let's say, the old front wing, and there was a new front wing for George. After qualifying, I think he left some messages, Lewis, with the British press, and I asked him on Sunday about whether that was his choice or that was the team's choice. He said they tossed a coin, but he said give it to George. That's what he told me.
Now, why? Can we just break that down a little bit? Why would Lewis Hamilton say give it to George? You know, they're hungry for performance, these guys, aren't they? Is it because he'd been told that the front wing might not work? Because it has to be said that Lewis was very quick in those practice sessions on Friday. Yeah. He hit the ground running with the old front wing. Why do you think he gave the front wing to George?
I don't know, because I asked him on Saturday whether the front wing was making any difference, and he said it did. So I tend to think more than that it was meant to be for George. Anyway, maybe I'm wrong, but from what Lewis said, that's the impression that they get. And then in the race, we heard Lewis on the radio saying, like, I told you, like, you could feel that he was not a friend of starting on the hard tire, because if this happened, like a red flag on the lap 1, they were going to be forced to run a medium for the whole race, basically for 77 laps, which was what George did in the end. So yeah, I think Lewis has been in very zen mode. It's been a joy to speak to Lewis this year, because although he's not getting any podiums or victories or pole positions, he's been quite relaxed and, looking at the bright side always.
Not always, Diego, because he also said to the British press after qualifying, he said, I don't think I'm going to out-qualify.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm not quoting him verbatim, but the implication was I'm not going to out-qualify George. I don't expect to out-qualify George for the rest of the year.
Yeah. But what I meant was he's been on that mood up until this weekend. For me, it's clear that this weekend he has been a little. I mean, he's not gone in the mood where he doesn't even speak because he's so frustrated. But he's a little less zen, let's say, this weekend.
But what is the message he's giving out by saying, I don't think I'm going to out-qualify George? Because it's certainly not, I think George is faster than me. So
Exactly.
what is the message?
I mean, since he was announced as Ferrari driver, we knew that at some point in the year, he was not going to be in all the meetings with all the information. I mean, the normal process that a driver leaving for another team, a rival team, faces once that date approaches. But Lewis's message is more like, this is coming earlier.
Yeah.
And that it's with what it seems from the outside.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He will also, be very pleased at the way Ferrari are improving, won't he? Because he knows he's going to be jumping into something that's very similar to this year's Ferrari next year, because we're not going to see a huge amount of development over the winter as all the teams start looking towards the 2026 regulations, which are actually a lot of noise is going to starting to be made about the regulations when we go to Canada in 2 weeks' time, when the regulations are given to the World Council. But that's for another day. Hamilton and Russell 7th and 5th respectively. Now Alpine, Pierre Gasly comes home 10th, scoring his first point of the year, but that wasn't really the biggest talking point from the race, was it? Let's hear what those two French drivers for Alpine made of that crash on lap 1.
Right now, I must say I'm very pleased and very relieved for the whole team, because we knew Monaco was a place where there will be an opportunity, even if we struggle with the car since the start of the year. Monaco is quite special, and we managed to seize the opportunity yesterday with that first Q3, and it was important to capitalize on that, and that's what we did. Unfortunately, it wasn't as peaceful as we had planned, and these things should not happen, and it was clear instructions from the team on what to do, and this wasn't respected. So I'm just glad we managed to get out of it with only some front wing damage and a couple of things, and luckily with the red flag we managed to repair, but we can't afford as a team to have both cars out, and potentially we could have maybe scored points with both cars, and we'll talk about it, and I'm sure we'll move on and find solutions in the future.
It was a hard launch in the air and a hard landing, but obviously it's an unfortunate incident, for us to retire early in the race after a long race that they was gonna go later on. So a tough one. We tried to basically put the car back in the garage, so pull out of the fast lane to try and repair what we could repair, but unfortunately we discovered too much damage sustained. So a chaotic first lap, and just an unfortunate incident.
What did you make of the crash between Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon?
I think Esteban was a little too optimistic, and I think he recognized that on social media briefly after he left the TV pen. If you do that move on any driver, it's on. Like Senna said, if you don't go for a gap, you're no longer a racing driver. Sometimes drivers take that very literal, but when it's your teammate, you gotta at least make sure that you leave room for him, and probably this wasn't the case here with Pierre.
He just sort of ran out of room on the exit, didn't he?
Because
they were actually alongside each other.
Yeah.
He just sort of pushed Pierre almost into the barrier, didn't he, there?
Yeah, I mean, he rolled over the right front tire and almost flipped on the contact. But yeah, I guess the fact that he publicly put it out that he took the blame for it's good. It's just, let's turn the page and not make a big fuss out of this.
And Bruno Famin, the team principal of Alpine, said there will be consequences. Now, we don't know what the consequences are. Okay, the stewards have given Esteban a 5-place grid penalty for Montreal. So his race in Montreal is a little bit scuppered before he even starts. Given, I think, the expected pace of the Alpine there is not going to be great. So give him a 5-place grid penalty and he's going to be starting at the back. But what could those consequences be? I mean, we don't know. It could be financial, or, I mean, there's a bit of a rumour going around the paddock that maybe Jack Doohan could get his Grand Prix debut in Canada. I mean, that is what is being talked about. And Jack did do a brilliant job on Friday night for the team. You know, they didn't have the best Friday in practice here. Jack, actually, here's the story. I can tell you his schedule, Diego. He flew on Friday from Monaco or Nice back to the UK. He goes to Enstone. He's on the simulator at Enstone, working through various setups until 3:30 in the morning.
Wow.
Doesn't go to bed, flies back to Monaco, and he's in the Monaco paddock at 9:30 on Saturday morning, having been on the sim in England until 3:30 a.m.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
I
kind
saw
of
him this morning.
that's commitment, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that commitment has impressed the team. I'm being flippant, and I'm not saying for a second that Esteban Ocon deserves, you know, to be replaced by Jack Doohan, but I do think Jack is impressing the team, and as they try and work out what to do with their driver lineup in 25, Jack is doing all the right things, I feel, to at least be high up the list of possibilities.
I think Alpine needs to first fix the car and then see which drivers best fit the team. But I guess their main issue is not with the drivers, although you don't want to see them coming together like they did here. But I guess they have bigger problems to fix than that.
Let's look at the positives, though, for that team. You know, Gasly was quick here in qualifying, and it is all about Saturday, isn't it? And then he just delivered in the race. He just, you know, he rattled off the laps, didn't make any mistakes, and things are heading in the right direction for them, aren't they? They're nothing like, the depth of their problems is nothing like as bad as it was back in Bahrain.
That's positive, although this weekend was going to be their best chance, because it's a track where the power deficit that they have been carrying is not such a big issue. As you well said, Canada may be a different story because of that, amongst all other things, but at least they have this result. They can build on this. I'm happy for Pierre too, because it's been a fighting year for both drivers at Alpine, knowing that the car was overweight, not competitive. It's a works team, you know, and when you're signed with the works team, you would expect to be at least, you know, in the midfield, and that's not where they were at the start of the year. So they're starting to make progress. It's a team in transition because there has been plenty of movement, revolving doors over there for the past couple of years. At some point, Bruno Faman will be able to stabilize the ship and put it towards what their goals are for the short and midterm.
And I'm told by the team that David Sanchez has come in as technical director only, 3 weeks ago, but there's apparently David's saying there's quite a lot of low-hanging fruit that they can grab hold of and make. So there's quite a lot of progress he thinks they can make quite quickly with this car. Now, just a couple of other drivers I wanted to talk to you about. Yuki Tsunoda.
Wow.
Yuki, what is it? He's now scored points in 5 of the last 6 races. He is Mr. Consistent and Mr. Quick. You know, you don't qualify 8th in Monaco without doing a really good job in a high pressure situation in Q3. I can't understand why he's not part of the conversation for that second Red Bull seat. What do you think?
I don't think he understands either why his name is not even brought up as a possible driver for Red Bull in the future. He's doing all the right things. He's beating a former Monaco winner. Daniel was at some point one of the top drivers in Formula One. He's clearly getting beaten by Yuki on a consistent basis now. Yuki seems to have his head now in a very good place, not letting his temper flare as much as before. We've probably only seen one episode of that, which was understandable when he was asked to move over for Daniel at the first race of the year in Bahrain. But after that, he has been just on it. He's really delivered. And I guess at some point, if he doesn't find what he believes he deserves out of being a Red Bull driver, he's going to have to look elsewhere. And this is a very good moment for him to look at that, because he's clearly making the right things on the track.
Now, VCarb changed their brake material very recently. They went from, I think, Carbon Industry. They're now using Brembo, which I'm told the initial peak of the brake is better than the ones they had before. In terms of confidence, do you have an opinion on that as to how it might affect the two drivers, particularly Daniel Ricciardo? When you change brake material, how significant is that in the world of being a Formula One driver?
Yeah, I mean, without being an engineer, although I have a title as industrial engineer, never worked on that, I must say. I prefer Formula 1.
You can always fall back on it for whatever reason. It's good to have.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, I remember back in the day when drivers, I remember with Montoya at some point at Williams, he chose to have a different brand of carbon discs to rough. I remember back then was Carbon Industry, and the other one was, I don't remember the brand, but maybe it was Brembo. But anyway, you could see in the past that drivers in the same team may choose to have different manufacturers in terms of discs and pads of brake material, just because they get the feeling that it gave them was better, and they felt more confident on the brakes. So it may well affect both drivers in different ways. Maybe one adapts easier to it than the other, and yeah, it could play a part, but I wouldn't say that would be the reason why Daniel is getting beaten by Yuki.
Well, and we're going to find out more, I guess, when we go to Montreal with
yeah,
all those big.
Circuit.
It's a brake circuit, isn't it? So I guess watch that space at VCARB just to see. I think Yuki at the minute, up until now, up until the brake change, has been gaining more than Daniel under braking. So if he's had this race to bed himself in, and we go to Montreal, of course, scene of Daniel's first victory in Formula 1, 10 years ago, 2014.
Wow.
But interesting to see how that develops. Look, last driver I wanted to ask you about, Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz teammate next year. I'm joking.
Well, you know what? One thing was interesting this weekend. They both had to go to the stewards, and when you read the document, Alex, he played it fair. He said, from what you read on the document, that he didn't feel it was a proper impeding maneuver from Sainz. So he helped Carlos not get penalized. I mean, he was not going to gain any way. He was not going to gain any positions on the grid if Carlos had been penalized. But some drivers just don't mind, and if they can get someone else down and beat them even at the steward's office, they will.
Diego, that's a really good point. I think the deal's done.
We're reading it too much into it again.
Yeah, but Alex is a good guy, and he's driving beautifully.
Is.
And I think that P9 finish here in Monaco, I mean, it's richly deserved. And I feel Williams have had a really tough start to the season as well, for lots of reasons. I mean, the cars were late, to the Bahrain test, and they've been on the back foot ever since then. And just maybe the momentum will start to shift now and be a little bit more positive, and they can be a bit more forward thinking from here on.
Even Logan Sargent did some overtaking today, and that was good for him, because I think in qualifying he couldn't find more speed. He came on the radio saying that's all I have. That's just as good as I can go, as fast as I can go, and it wasn't enough to be in Q2. And Alex went all the way to Q3. So, I mean, it's tough days for him. Hopefully he can build on this too, and as the car improves, he also improves, because sometimes it happens that when the car is difficult, the driver who's going through a tough batch is affected more by it in some way. So yeah, let's see. But he's having a difficult time right now at Williams, and while Alex is finally getting the kind of results that they believe they can get consistently once they shed more weight off the car.
And what about Aston Martin? Alonso 11th, Stroll 14th after making a stop. I mean, what a difference a year makes. I still think back to Q3 last year and seeing Alonso, that lap that he so nearly got pole. And this year, out in Q1, I know it was timing and everything was incredibly close in Q1, but that car isn't where it needs to be. I mean, I'm stating the obvious, but I was in Aston Martin this morning, funnily enough, talking to Tom McCulloch, and he was just giving us a briefing about strategy, but you just sense the frustration in every sentence that Tom, the chief engineer there, uttered. What's your take on Aston Martin?
Yeah, I asked Fernando on the TV pen, what was his main takeaway from these two races where he hasn't been, on it. He had the crash at Imola, and he was out in Q1 here. there was some traffic, he said, on Saturday, that he lost 3 tenths in one corner, 2 tenths in the other, and the gap between fastest and P15 in Q1 was about half a second, so he could have easily been into Q2. But he admitted that the car was not easy to drive. He admits that these 2 races were necessary for the team to realize that they have issues and that they need to fix those issues and start fixing them quick, because otherwise they're getting in the crutches of VCARB, you know. There are no points here, and VCARB scores again.
I find it interesting that obviously the car is not performing, and in the past when it's been like that, you put your money on Alonso to sort of drag whatever performance there is still in that car. You put your money on him, not Stroll, to get the lap time out of it. Yet these last few races, Lance Stroll is actually the guy pulling the lap time out of it, which is new.
I get your point, but also when you put the car where Alonso has put the Aston Martin, sometimes you need to go a little extra, you know, and when the car is not in the good place, it's easier to have the kind of moments that he had at Imola with the crash, and that probably put him all the way on the back foot for the rest of the weekend. So that ruined his weekend at Imola. And here it was, I guess it was a different thing. The car was difficult to drive, but I believe those 2 races were not exactly, I mean, the reason for the results were not the same. There were different things playing in, but when a driver like Alonso puts the Aston Martin in a place that you don't expect, is because he's, you know, taking some risks and trying to do things that you believe the car is not capable of, and he manages. That comes with a risk, and sometimes he pays the price.
Did you sense, talking to Alonso, that he's still calm? Because I was told that Lawrence Stroll blew a gasket after Imola. I don't know whether that's true, but you know, you sense Alonso still relaxed, or is he starting to? Can you feel the frustration now?
Yeah, I can feel it. Yeah, there are certain things that Alonso doesn't like about the whole format in terms of when we get to speak to him, you know. But I guess there's an underlying frustration that this is happening all over again, because it's what happened last year.
Yeah.
When they had the second fastest car at the beginning of the year, and suddenly they started to drop back, and it was a challenge to be in Q3. Now this time around, it wasn't like they started as good as last year, but the car was good in qualifying in the first couple of races. Then they have had to change that to be better in the race, but it doesn't seem to be making any steps towards being a more consistent Q3 car and being there with Mercedes. So yeah, they seem to be dropping back a bit.
Well, night is starting to fall here on the Monaco paddock. We're seeing the teams are packing up. The boats are still partying like mad. This place somehow, you know, it's only, 2.5 square kilometers or something in size, but it seems to get bigger every year. The size of the boats, it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. It was very special to hear the, I don't know how you call them in English, the horns of the boats.
That's right. I went on the slowdown lap after Charles won.
but they usually are only for the winner on Sunday, and this time they were also there for Saturday for Charles Pole, and they were on even before Charles crossed the finish line. So yeah, in the end it was I guess it was a special weekend for Formula One to see the little prince of Formula One finally get his win at Monaco. He had to work hard for it, and he's finally got it. He's now second in the championship. Well, he was already, but he's now closer to Max, and he's now the hope that we may have a fight for the championship. The last time he was in this position, things suddenly fell down to pieces, but it was a very different year than this one, because back then it was like they started up there and then they started falling down. This time they are racing to the challenge of Red Bull.
So the top 10 looked like this. They finished as they started. Charles Leclerc taking his first win in almost 2 years and his first through the streets of Monaco. He came home ahead of Oscar Piastri and Carlos Sainz. Then came Lando Norris in 4th, George Russell in 5th, Max Verstappen 6th and Lewis Hamilton 7th. Yuki Tsunoda made it 5 points finishes in the last 6 races, coming home in 8th place. Alex Albon scored his first points of the season in 9th and Pierre Gasly did the same in 10th. In the Drivers' Championship, things are hotting up, with Leclerc now only 31 points behind Verstappen. Norris is third, just 5 points ahead of Carlos Sainz, who jumps up to fourth, 1 point ahead of Checo Perez in fifth. Oscar Piastri is sixth, George Russell seventh, Lewis Hamilton eighth, Fernando Alonso ninth, and Yuki Tsunoda is 10th. In the Constructors' Championship, things are even closer. Ferrari just 24 points behind Red Bull Racing. McLaren are in a lonely third place, 68 points behind Ferrari and 88 points ahead of Mercedes in fourth. Aston Martin are fifth, VCarb are sixth, and Haas are seventh. Williams jump up to eighth, following Albon's 2 points that he scored here. Alpine are ninth, and Sauber are the only team still yet to score. Well, it's been a brilliant weekend, and I suppose I don't have to ask you who your driver of the day is. I mean, Charles Leclerc got the vote on the telly. Who is your driver of the day?
I think he was the driver of the weekend. What Mark was saying was very true. I mean, he was on it from the first lap, and I think it's hard to make big gaps here at Monaco because it's the shortest lap of the year. Time-wise, it's also, a tenth here is maybe 3/10 in a longer track, and he was making big gaps all the time. So I applaud him for taking those risks that he admitted he was taking from very early on in the week, and not hit the car at any point. Maybe brush a barrier here or there, but not really looking like he was gonna make a mistake anytime.
He's been on it, hasn't he? He really has. It's been a joy to watch him, deliver after all of those frustrations. There's been a confidence about Charles Leclerc all weekend, even on Thursday, before he even sat in the thing. So, my driver of the day as well, Charles Leclerc, with a mention in dispatches for Yuki Tsunoda again. Yuki being utterly brilliant. Well, Diego, it's a pleasure. You've done the double on the nation, and I'm very grateful, and I love your insight, so thank you very much.
No, thank you, Tom. It was nice to be on back-to-back F1 Nation podcast.
And before I go, a quick shout out about this week's F1 Beyond the Grid. Now, my guest is Antti Konsas, who was Sebastian Vettel's performance coach, among other drivers, and he provides a really insightful masterclass, I like to call it really, in how to physically and mentally prepare drivers for Formula One racing. That is out on your podcast feeds on Wednesday. But thank you very much for listening. We will, of course, be back next Monday with our preview of the Canadian Grand Prix. But for now, F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audioboom Studios.